Maddie Kelly had been editing Paul Kennedy's books for a year. Over that time, she secretly fell in love with him. Paul was everything she admired. He was handsome, successful, and a celebrated author. Despite her feelings, Maddie hadn't shared her secret with anyone except her mother, Rosemary, who was the principal of a school in Des Moines, Iowa. Maddie's best friends, Emma and Heather, whom she had known since school, had no idea. When Paul invited Maddie to his latest book launch, she decided to bring Emma and Heather along, hoping it would be an exciting evening for all of them. Secretly, though, Maddie had another plan. She intended to tell Paul how she felt about him. She hoped he might feel the same way. At the event, Maddie finally got a moment alone with Paul. She was ready to open up, but before she could, Paul had a different proposal. He asked her if she would help him write his next book, which came as a surprise. While she was glad for the opportunity, it wasn't the confession of love she had been hoping for. Then, Paul was introduced to Emma. Sparks flew almost instantly. Emma seemed very interested in him, and the two hit it off. Emma, wanting to impress Paul, even told him that she loved reading, though it wasn't true. The two shared laughs, and before the night ended, Paul gave Emma his phone number. Maddie watched them from a distance, feeling a mix of emotions she couldn't quite describe. 3 months later, Maddie, Emma, and Heather were flying with Paul to his home in Ireland, where he and Emma were getting married. Maddie tried to push her feelings aside, focusing instead on supporting Emma as a bridesmaid alongside Heather. At the luggage reclaim, Maddie found herself in a heated argument with a man from England. His bag was identical to hers, and they both reached for it at the same time. After a brief disagreement, they ended up at the lost luggage office, where Maddie, growing frustrated, insisted that Emma and Heather go on without her. With no Uber taxis in the area, Maddie had no choice but to take a bus to Kennedy House, the grand home where the wedding would take place. To her surprise, the Englishman from the luggage reclaim was on the same bus. He turned out to be a photographer in town to cover the sheep shearing festival. They exchanged more playful banter, and Maddie couldn't help but feel a little more at ease around him. When she finally arrived at Kennedy House, she found that Paul's parents, Sean and Olivia, were an influential and wealthy couple who owned a beautiful castle. Meanwhile, the photographer, staying at a local pub and B&B owned by a man named Murphy, was far from the wedding scene but seemed to be making the best of his trip. During a picnic by the lake with Paul, his brother Corey, and their friends, Maddie decided to stay behind, feeling like an outsider. As she wandered, she stumbled upon a bench labeled, "Wishing Bench." Overcome with emotion, Maddie whispered a wish, "I wish Paul was marrying me." To her surprise, a fairy appeared before her. As a strong gust of wind blew, Maddie lost her balance and fell back. When she woke up, everything felt different. She was no longer just a guest, she was the bride-to-be. Her suitcase appeared in her room, now with a wedding dress inside. Paul emerged from her bathroom, freshly showered, confirming that her wish had somehow come true. But as Maddie tried to absorb the magic of the moment, doubts began to creep in. Paul, in his excitement, proposed they take a bike ride together, but Maddie wasn't skilled enough to ride properly. Emma, always more confident, took her place. Then, when it came time for the wedding, Maddie was told that she was expected to wear an heirloom dress instead of the one she had brought. She couldn't help but wonder if everything was as perfect as it seemed, or if something was off. As Maddie chased after the fairy, trying to make sense of what was happening, she tripped and ended up tumbling into the open convertible of James Thomas, the photographer she had met at the airport and on the bus. However, due to the fairy's meddling with the events, James didn't recognize her. He had no memory of their previous encounters, and Maddie was left stunned by the change. Meanwhile, at the wedding, things were taking an unexpected turn. The wedding photographer had quit, and Paul's mother, Olivia, was growing increasingly anxious. When she saw James, she immediately thanked Maddie for finding him as a replacement. James, who had just learned that the sheep shearing event he was supposed to photograph had been cancelled, agreed to step in as the wedding photographer. Although he didn't recall Maddie, their paths were still destined to cross again, bringing her into the wedding preparations. That night, as Maddie slept, Paul climbed into bed beside her. When his hand accidentally brushed against her, Maddie was startled and instinctively punched him. The shock of the moment left Paul not fully recovered by morning, so Maddie decided to go alone with James to search for picturesque spots for the wedding photos. As they traveled, James made an observation. He noted that Maddie and Paul seemed to have almost nothing in common. He also remarked that Maddie had been avoiding her own writing ambitions, possibly because she had been so caught up in helping Paul with his book. Meanwhile, Rosemary, Maddie's mother, was supposed to attend the wedding, but due to a malfunctioning clock, she missed her flight, leaving Maddie disappointed. On their return to the Kennedys, a storm caused a tree to fall, blocking the road. With no way forward, Maddie and James sought refuge in a nearby pub. There, they spent the evening enjoying darts, pints, and even dancing together. It was a night of unexpected joy. The next morning, the fallen tree was cleared, allowing the road to open again. Maddie and James returned just in time for the rehearsal, where Emma had filled in for Maddie. During dinner later that evening, as Maddie sat quietly, she was startled by the appearance of the fairy, now revealed to be Saint Brigid. In that moment, Maddie realized that despite being so close to Paul, she knew almost nothing about him. Maddie soon realizes that her true soulmate isn't Paul, but James. The more she observes Paul and Emma, the more she sees how connected they are. Emma, though heartbroken, hides her feelings for the sake of her best friend. On the morning of the wedding, Paul notices Emma's sadness, but she doesn't admit to it. Maddie, grappling with her own emotions, confesses to the priest about her wish to Saint Brigid. The priest explains that Saint Brigid is mischievous, giving people not what they want, but what they need. Maddie finally comes to terms with her feelings and sees Emma before the ceremony, where she confirms that she still cares about Paul, but promises to try and fix things. When it's time for Maddie to walk down the aisle, she defies expectations. She walks in regular clothes, telling everyone the wedding shouldn't happen because she and Paul aren't in love. Paul, furious and confused, sees Maddie talking with James earlier and jumps to conclusions. He blames James for Maddie's change of heart, and they erupt in a heated argument. The fight makes it clear that Maddie's heart is no longer with Paul. After the confrontation, James abruptly leaves, and Maddie follows him, trying to make sense of everything. James feels guilty, thinking he's partly responsible for the chaos. They share a kiss, but the weight of the situation makes him drive off. Determined to make things right, Maddie drives back to the wishing bench. She pleads with Saint Brigid to undo her wish, asking for time to rewind. Miraculously, her request is granted. Time resets, and Paul and Emma go on to marry, just as they were meant to. After the reception, Maddie confronts Paul. She tells him that she won't continue editing his books unless she's credited as a co-writer. With that settled, she finds James near the pub. To her relief, he now remembers her from the airport and the bus ride. Their connection is restored, and they're finally able to start anew. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.